And it's amazing how little Courtney and I talked about and how relevant it is to today's sermon. That's what happens when you have a good team of folks. With all of the events of this week, I'm so glad to see each of your faces this morning. We bring to this space that which is heavy on our hearts, looking for ways we can ease our burdens, heal our hearts, and most importantly, remind ourselves that we are not alone. We share hard stories together. We talk about hard things here. Our personal stories of suffering, our collective stories of the suffering of others. And it's important, so important, to have a place to let these stories out, to unleash our emotions, to remind one another of our sphere of influence and opportunities for transformational change. Every time that someone is sharing their story with me and they start to cry, I tell them from the wisdom of Shrek, better out than in. It's good to get these things out, is it not? And sometimes we need distractions, right? And one of mine these days, you're going to be so proud that I do this, is watching a show called Paranormal Caught on Camera. The premise of the show is this: recognizing in this new age where cameras are everywhere, including in each of our possessions all of the time, we have more evidence of paranormal phenomena than ever. Evidence of ghosts, unidentified aerial phenomena or UFOs, shadow people, and cryptids like Bigfoot and Yetis. Each episode captures multiple events from recent years, and with better technology, we are seeing things more clearly and more frequently seeing things that we cannot explain. We have become a world of untrained journalists, and each day, whether we use them or not, our phones are recording history. This imagery of the world overly saturated with recordings takes me back to 1984. The book, not the year, by George Orwell. I would not recommend for your personal mental health to read 1984 if you have not already. It's going to be a little too triggering probably right now. But for those of you who missed this classic, Orwell created an entire school of thought, Orwellianism, a description of authoritarian and totalitarian social practices. Written in 1949, he describes a world with screens everywhere, with behavior recorded on video, where people are monitored, thought and speech is controlled, and words are redefined. Orwell's classic added several important words to our dictionary, including the word doublespeak, when we use euphemisms, jargon, and ambiguity to hide uncomfortable concepts. And we do this all the time. Terms like downsizing, to describe when we have laid off hundreds of workers and made their families struggle. Green infrastructure, to describe hills and valleys and rivers. And collateral damage, to describe civilian, innocent deaths in war. In many significant ways, we are living in 1984. This week I had a conversation with a non-parish minister who demanded of us colleagues to preach in support of marginalized communities without naming the evil which oppresses them. Sacred texts for thousands of years have taught us how speaking the true name of someone gives us power over that entity. Jewish folks avoid speaking the name of God to acknowledge their belief in God's power. Even when Moses asks God to reveal God's name, Moses is told, "I am who I am." In Homer's Odysseus, when confronted with Polyphemus, Odysseus tells the giant he is nobody. In Harry Potter, it is Harry's insistence of calling him Voldemort instead of he who should not be named, which empowers him to eventually defeat his nemesis. Our courage to say people's names and use clear language is one way of confronting the confusing times ahead. This week has been heart-wrenching for many of us. Our fears have become actualized. Our marginalized communities have become actively threatened. And our country has become a threat to the self-determination of other nations, an earthquake in what was once semi-stable, and a bully to leaders and people around the world. Make no mistake, the events of this week should not be surprising to any of us. We knew this was coming, and outrage is exhausting. Believing that you will wake up and read the news feed and not feel outrage is just going to be very disappointing for the next 4 years. We need to reframe that. The TikTok ban that Trump heroically saved was orchestrated from the beginning. And Gaza was used as a pawn, just like the Iran hostage crisis, which removed Jimmy Carter from the White House. Terrible, horrible, no good, very bad things are coming. For at least the next 2 years until the next midterm election, every news cycle is going to feel like poison to our emotions. Our survival rests in our ability to move those emotions from our limbic system, our fight or flight, into our prefrontal cortex, understanding our emotions, and then moving to action with our logical, planned, forward-thinking minds that we all have. And I'm not asking for an easy thing here. It is really, really difficult for some of us to move into rational thinking when we are constantly outraged. Did everyone see Elon give the Nazi salute twice in his speech this week? How quickly we were told we did not see what we saw. How quickly those still images of other leaders were equated to that video in defending that everyone does it. How quickly we were told that that's just a symptom of having autism. We are living in 1984. We cannot let them control our minds, our culture, our language. We are the protectors of history, including the history which is being written right now as we speak. Which is why I declare something very controversial from this pulpit today. I am an American patriot. I know, you're like, oh my gosh, she just had a stroke. Hear me out, hear me out. Like our Unitarian forefathers, John Adams and John Quincy Adams, like our civil rights heroes, Reverend James Reeb and Viola Liuzzo, like our civil rights legends, Virginia Volker and Charles Cleveland. Our faith tradition is a list of American heroes, patriots who fought and sometimes died for their belief in democracy and equity for all. A patriot is someone who loves their country, who takes pride in what the country has accomplished, and wants the best for their country. A patriot is not a nationalist. A nationalist holds allegiance to a nation and believes that allegiance outweighs individual or group interest, and that the nation is better than all others. I am not a nationalist. As Unitarian Universalists, we can hold that nuance together of appreciating that there are many beautiful and wonderful things about our country, our land, our people, our diverse mix of cultures, religions, and ideas. And at the same time, we can say we have many flaws, past and present, and we are pursuing improvement. I am literally, officially, certifiably, a daughter of the American Revolution. One of my revolutionary ancestors, Robert Ashley, fought in Virginia to rid our country of a tyrannical despot, allowing us to create a government by the people, for the people. I am also a daughter of Union veterans, for my ancestor Josephus Smith walked from Indiana to Georgia. Walked from Indiana to Georgia. Did you hear me? That's a long way. To fight the Confederacy, to rid ourselves of that evil that was suffocating our land. I bleed red, white, and blue. And because of the sacrifices of my ancestors and many other veterans and active military today, one of our most valuable freedoms is the freedom we have to criticize our government. Yes. Around the world, there are countries who are better than us at so many other things, but very few enshrine the rights and liberties guaranteed to us by the U.S. Constitution. We are not only free to criticize our government, we are free to criticize our history, recognizing injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Our founders, as problematic as they were, knew that this United States experiment was a fragile one, and they tried to pave a path which guarded us from tyranny, a path constantly reworking itself as we evolved. The next 4 years will test their system to the very limit. And I can't believe this needs to be said, but the freedom that my ancestors fought for also allows me to criticize any other government in the world. Governments who suppress criticism are not free and fair societies. The President of the United States does not have the power to redefine words and to redefine actions. He does not have the power to equate patriotism with nationalism. He does not have the power to define your gender. He does not have the power to define your sexuality. He does not have the power to define where your home is. He cannot change your inherent worth and dignity. He will, we knew he would, try to rob us of gender-affirming services. He will forcibly relocate more people than we dare to imagine. We still have not reunited 1,400 children from his first administration. And our collective power through groups like the ACLU, the Human Rights Campaign, and immigrant justice groups are already pushing back. He cannot change our rights permanently. We are endowed with certain inalienable rights, namely to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. To all undocumented persons living in the United States, you are already home. We will continue to fight for your legal recognition, for the contributions you offer to our country, and for your children to grow up alongside ours in the land of the free and the home of the brave. The Constitution is the law of the land, not the president. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States. Ironically, the same amendment that Trump wants to dismantle is the one which also says in Section 3, and I'm chopping out some things here, but it says, no person shall hold any office under the United States who, having previously taken an oath, shall have engaged in insurrection or rebellion against the U.S. Constitution, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. This administration is not one of law and order, even though they will tell you that is who they are. It is one of imperialism, protectionism, and fascism. And those are three siblings that move together through time. And what's hard about all this, what concerns me, is how easy it is to succumb to helplessness when we see what is happening. The ICE raids, the immediate halts in normal governmental processes until employees and programs can be vetted by Trump's people, the laundry list of cabinet members who somehow missed the washing machine. And all this happens while we carry very heavy burdens in our own lives. Family turmoil, financial stress, health issues, conflicts at work. I've heard so many people say how their own lives are so desperate, so consuming, that they are unable to summon the strength to fight a fascist regime. Believe me, I understand. The pressures of pastoring our congregations, the impossibility of never being able to please everyone, summoning the strength to say what will comfort the afflicted and will afflict the comfortable, and ensuring that our day-to-day path to collective liberation is realized, are only some of the heavy burdens I carry. And yet each of us has been empowered for such a time as this, bringing our own gifts and experience to this work so that we can all make it to the other side together. What is the heaviest thing on your heart today? Consider for a moment where you are right now. Even though this heavy thing weighs on your heart, you are here. Whether physically or online, you might have even showered or had breakfast or drank some water or said hello to someone else. Despite whatever burden it is that you are carrying, you are not letting this burden define you. Even as there are ways that you acknowledge this pain in your own life. Even as you may be actively working to change or accept this influence in your own life, you are still here, making a commitment to show up, to be seen, to maybe even share your story with someone. Every moment that we spend cultivating hope and joy, celebrating beauty, cultivating relationships, we are revolutionary. This past week, my family rewatched the movie, The Never-Ending Story. Do you remember it? The story centers around a boy named Bastian, whose mother has recently died. And Bastian is struggling to maintain, basic functions. Eating breakfast, going to school, interacting with his peers. Along the way, he encounters a magical storybook which envelops him in a fantastical world. One where eventually he must use his imagination to save the creatures who live there. The evil he fights is called the Nothing, a cloud of indeterminate shape and power, representing the death of imagination, whose emissaries attack the heroes through their emotions, their sadness, their grief, their fear. Eventually, Bastian names the Empress. Remember what I said about names having power. And the power of naming her saves the world. He screams her name only at the last minute, and Bastian and the Empress sit for a moment in the darkness because the whole world has gone away. And in her hand, she is holding one speck of sand. And Bastian says, "What is that?" And the childlike Empress says, "It is one grain of sand. It is all that remains from my vast empire." And he says, "Fantasia has totally disappeared?" Yes. He says, then everything's been in vain. This whole adventure. And she says, "No, it hasn't. Fantasia can arise anew from your dreams and wishes, Bastian." Beloveds, we are here looking at that speck of sand. We can grieve that all we have left is a speck of sand, and we can recollect the dreams of our country, the dreams of our ancestors, the dreams of our children. We must keep alive the dreams for this country that our ancestors died for, and plan ahead for the future that we want for this country. We must remember what this land was made of, who this land was made for. This land was made for you and for me. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. When injustice becomes law, resistance becomes duty. As we live through this time together, let us focus on the sphere of influence each of us has over the world around us. For our personal burdens, balancing what we can do, letting go of what we cannot. Those are important models for living, which is why the Serenity Prayer has such power and strength. It is the same of that which hovers over our civic life. What is within our sphere of influence? We cannot allow the grief, the fear, the helplessness to overpower us into submission. And recognizing what is in our power to change will transform our choices, will facilitate our self-determination, and will spark hope within us. When we go to our public library, and we should go all the time, we can check out books that are controversial or at risk of banning. And here's the crazy part. We can do that even if we don't intend to read them, because we are keeping those books in circulation. If a book is not checked out in 18 months, it goes to the discard pile. So you don't even have to read it. That's the freedom. You just need to check it out. You could even take it back the next day, but you are still keeping that book in circulation. That is within our sphere of influence to do, right? And even if you don't have kids, you can go into the children's section, make sure those history books get checked out. We can focus our attention on matters that are closer to us. The legislators in Montgomery, our city councilors, our school and library boards. Even if we do nothing more than attend those meetings and pay attention, we are keeping watch over our fragile democracy. When we see an opportunity to help ease the suffering of someone else, no matter how seemingly small, like donating diapers or food or dry goods to our church pantry, our compassion and generosity plant seeds of love. We can help one another by listening to each other's stories, by making room for pain and sadness, and holding one another's burdens in love. Cultivate friendships here. Hold one another up. And when we encounter hate or unmarked black vehicles that have been up and down a certain highway recently, we can whip out our phones and hit record. Witnessing and recording are powerful methods to ensure that history is being preserved so that future generations may learn from our present. Who controls the past controls the future. And who controls the present controls the past. In a world which is always recording us, we can flip the script to record our perspective, preserving it for generations. And where possible, with a lot of caveats in place, as much as we can and as loudly as we can, we must speak up and speak out in our boardrooms and job sites, in our families and in our neighborhoods, to our political leaders and to our TikTok communities. The world needs to hear that the United States is not a monolith. We need to be on record, like Anne Frank and Elie Wiesel, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Corrie ten Boom. Remember the words of Reverend Martin Niemöller, who said this: upon his freedom from a Nazi concentration camp, which he lived in for 8 years. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. And then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. There is no doubt that the nothing threatens to swallow the United States. And our resistance, a carefully balanced process of self-care, activism, and awareness, is our only hope. Let history show us, as Unitarian Universalists, as people who speak up, who show up, who record atrocities, who help others, who keep our libraries alive. Each of us has a different sphere of influence, and each of us, like Bastian, can make more of a difference than we realize. You are the history makers. You are the dreamers. Now does not mean always. Amen.
Please rise and body your spirit for our hymn and join together in singing number 170 and the hardcover hymnal. If you would like to join our church this morning, please come forward during the closing hymn.
just want to say thank you for your affirmation. It's a lot to get up in that pulpit right now. It's really hard. And I do it for you, and I love you so much. So thank you for your love. I'm delighted to have two new members this morning, both of whom went with us yesterday on our